let's talk to Cameron in Minnesota. Cameron,
Hello.
welcome to the show. How can we help you today?
Okay, so I work night shift at a plastics company, and there's a guy who we've been working with past like month or two. He's new, and he speaks like 4 or 5 different languages. He lived all over, for lack of a better term, all over creation in different countries and whatnot. And somehow we got onto the conversation about God and whatnot, and all of a sudden there was that moment that hit when he was like, wait, you don't believe in God? And I was like, well, no, I haven't been given sufficient evidence. And then he started talking about the Quran and how much science was in the Quran and how about like 6 billion people believe it can't be false, the argument ad populum, I think that is, or whatever. But I didn't know enough about how to defend with it being the Quran. Like if it was the Bible, I could have, held my own all day. But being as he was coming from the perspective of the Quran and all this so-called science that was in it, I didn't know how to defend. You kind of get my gist.
Yeah, and I feel you. I think that there's a certain amount of extra caution that I take when I'm engaging with religions that are not the one I grew up in, because I can't speak to beyond my experience, and I have expertise in one particular religion, right? The others, not so much. But I have found through doing the show and having conversations online that a lot of the religions have the same problems, and there will be difference in what exactly they're referencing, but things like, well, 6 billion people believe in it, so why isn't it true? Like, that is always going to be an argumentum ad populum, right? Like, regardless of the book they're referencing, there's still a logical fallacy there, an informal fallacy. So I think one way to approach this is certainly to brush up on informal fallacies and make sure that you understand how people construct arguments, if this is something you want to do in the future, right? So that will actually help you pinpoint a lot of these problems before it even gets too specific regarding the actual book or denomination or religion. As far as
what if he doesn't like so I tried explaining to him what a logical fallacy was, and I gave him some examples like a straw man or argument ad populum, for example, or argument from incredulity. And it wasn't that he didn't want to understand it, it was that he just kind of didn't. Like, I listened to you guys all night at work, and then he showed me his phone, and he listens to like these imams talking all night at work, and both in our headphones or whatever. And like, I didn't really like, he understood the concept of fallacies, but like he didn't at the same time. And I know there is no one silver bullet argument. I know that's not a thing. I'm just...
Well, if I may, I would say if he's bringing up science in the Quran, I might counter by bringing up some of the...
things.
Sorry?
No, that was one of his big things, is he kept bringing up science. Yeah. And my first thing was to say, he said there was no contradictions. Well, I know about the contradictions of the Bible, but I don't know about contradictions about science and creation in the Quran.
Well, the thing about the Quran is it's actually got a doctrine behind it where if there is a contradiction, the verse that comes later is the one that supersedes the first one. So it's easier for a Muslim to wiggle out of contradictions than it is for a Christian, because they're not claiming that there are no contradictions. It'll just be the later verse is the one that takes precedence. As far as science in the Quran goes, exactly, I would then maybe be tempted to bring up the alleged science in the Vedas. So, like, for instance, the Rig Veda says the sun has tied the earth and other planets through attraction and moves them around itself as if a trainer moves newly trained horses around itself holding their reins. That's a pretty damn good description of gravity for something that was written before the Old Testament of the Bible was written. Like, this is the oldest religious text that we have still in existence today that's still used as a religious text. And
the Vedas are the Hindu ones, right?
Yeah, they're Hindu. So that one is specifically Rig Vedas, but you can just do a search for science in the Vedas, and there's a website that comes right up that's got a whole list of supposed scientific verses. And I don't like most Muslims and Christians will not want to admit that there is science in the Vedas, so they will engage in all sorts of motivated reasoning to explain why the science in these Vedas is not actually science. And it's like, some of that's a lot closer to actual science than any of the stuff found in the Bible or the Quran. And it's still,
right.
Most of the book is still quite wrong,
and the other one's more of an interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, like most of the Vedas science is entirely wrong, and like they've got I forget the details, but there's like 7 C's, and there's like one is milk and one is wine and one is butter and stuff like that. So like there is all sorts of nonsense in there as well, but you can make the science in the Vedas sound a lot more scientific than a lot of the things that are in the Quran and the Bible.
But the whole argument is just to be like, so if, there's all this science, how did this one before yours have the same amount of science?
Yeah.
Right. So then in the end,
it's a bit of a whataboutism, but the point in using that would not be so much to convince him that Hinduism is more scientific than Islam, but it could like help him see from your perspective that like, okay, well, you're applying this critical thinking to these Hindu texts that are apparently scientific. I am doing the same thing with these verses in the Quran. It's like it's not so much
like
that
the Book of Eric. It's kind of like the Book of Eric. Like if it has 9 things that are true and the 10th thing is false, does that make the entire thing true or something like that? Like,
yeah, even if you were able to point to some things in the Quran that were actually backed by science, regardless of what we were looking at, that wouldn't necessarily say anything about the truth of other claims. We could say, yes, this book accurately describes what a fetus inside of a sheep looks like or something, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of the claims are true. Another thing I do want to make sure I bring up here before we move on is I think a lot of these conversations around, well, there's science in these books, and these books are old, therefore it must have been magically granted by some deity, really belittles and kind of dumbs down the cultures of the time. Now, I'm not saying they were anywhere near as advanced as we are now, but look up something like the Antikythera mechanism. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I've been reading about it, and it's actually really fascinating. It was created sometime between 205 to like 70 BCE. So like when all of these books were being compiled and written and edited and all of that, and it tracks the planets, right? It tracks the planet's movements, and they just recreated it, and it's actually fairly accurate. It's really cool. I'd definitely check that out if you're interested. But this is an example of how we actually did know some stuff back then, right? Right? We weren't like, I know there's this phrase like, oh, well, like Bronze Age sheep herders created this book, and fair. But at the same time, like there was actual scientific advancement. There were scientists, especially in the Middle East. That was kind of where all of that began happening. So yeah, I think combining the understanding that if scientific elements are in a book, that does not validate the other claims within that book, and also understanding that yes, there are going to be scientific elements every once in a while. Some of them are going to be coincidence. Some of them are going to be really far off and ridiculous. But
Empedocles figured out thousands of years ago that air is a thing. Does that mean that we're also made of the 4 elements, air, fire, water, and earth?
Mm-hmm.
No. But he did make a scientific discovery.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's I
want to thank you guys. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right.
No, I just want to thank you guys for your time. Thank you for taking my call. And for Viced Rhino, I had called in the other day, and I just wanted to say there are 4 lights.
That was you?
Appreciate you.
Yeah, that was me.
All right, thanks, Cameron. Oh,
that was on the line.
What was this? This was on the line?
That was on the line. We were a bit slow on calls because it was Super Bowl Sunday, and so we took one about what my favorite Star Trek episode was. That was one of the top ones.
Dang it. That is a good one. That's an intense one.
It is, yeah.
Oh my gosh.